The people who work in Hollywood just can't help themselves, it seems. Howdy, space pirates. I am Dr. Disaster, the ever-charming captain of this fleet, and today I wanted to discuss one of the least impressive Hollywood personalities I can imagine, Leslye Headland, and a ridiculous interview that recently surfaced of her minimizing George Lucas's role in the creation of Star Wars.
Shit, no, man. I believe you get your ass kicked saying something like that, man.
Keep in mind that this woman is a social chameleon. My first instinct is to call her a snake, which is absolutely, evidently true, but she's also a chameleon. I say that because look at this image of her several years ago with convicted deviant Harvey Weinstein. Back when she worked for him, she looked like this, because that's what her job as his personal secretary obviously required. But now that someone was stupid enough, Kathleen Kennedy, to let her start making movies, now she dresses like something from Monsters, Inc. in order to score points with the harpy feminist woke crowd.
I'm watching you, Wazowski. Always watching.
Now, I'm not really trying to make fun of her appearance, mind you. I just can't help but notice this pretty dramatic change. When you combine that with the addle-brained things that she says in interviews, she clearly seems to be a clout chaser. She wants to be remembered, and she desperately wants to be framed as the victim. We're going to take a look at the recently surfaced interview she did and listen to how she minimizes George Lucas's role as the clear creator of Star Wars, while framing her and other poor whammon creators as victims.
Well, that's the story of my life. No respect.
Oh, that's too bad. We're so sorry.
Alright, let's take a look at this Bounding Into Comics article, which discusses this older interview. The headline reads, "The Acolyte showrunner Leslye Headland points to Star Wars creator George Lucas as an example of the misogyny of the auteur myth." Now, if you aren't familiar with the term auteur, it's French in origin and is defined as a filmmaker whose personal influence and artistic control over a movie are so great that the filmmaker is regarded as the author of the movie. Now, I personally can't think of a better way to describe George Lucas in regards to Star Wars. The man wrote it. The man created it. He was producer, director. Sure, he had help, and we don't want to minimize the contributions of others, but if you think he wasn't the auteur of the films, of the original 6 Star Wars films, then I don't know what to tell you other than this. You are so ideologically possessed that we can't even agree on basic definitions any longer. Anyhow, the article says, appearing on IndieWire's Filmmaker Toolkit podcast, Headland was asked by the host about a piece she wrote in The Hollywood Reporter where she allegedly challenged the auteur theory. She was asked, this concept, less of a voice or author, of more that they do it by themselves, am I wrong about that? Is that in that sense of it's one thing to have vision, it's one thing to have an author, but there's an element of how that comes to life? Headland responded, I think it's also just my experience in the hiring world of being a female writer/director, the number of jobs that I have not gotten infinite, and the amount of work that I have done to get them is enormous. And listen, no one said to my face, we don't think you can do this because you are a girl, but I do think there is an idea of what a director looks like. Alright, Leslye, nobody said it to your face because it's in your damn head. You're imagining it because you need to be the victim, because that's what Hollywood does now. They want to all paint themselves as victims, and you are jumping on that train because that's what you do. You're a chameleon. And as for the enormous work that you've done, I'm just asking for a friend here, but does that include getting coffee for Harvey Weinstein and keeping your mouth shut while he did horrible things to women? Just asking for a friend. Anyhow, she continued, and a lot of people will say, no, it's what you do, and the cream rises to the top, and just the best person for the job. And the only reason I disagree with that is partially because the auteur myth is so strong that it is really what they want to see is a guy come in there who will do everything himself, who basically can say, I will do all of this by myself and it will be perfect and you don't need to worry about everything. Yeah. That's what a director is. And if I were in charge of hiring someone to be a director, I would absolutely want someone who was going to do the job competently and assure me I wouldn't have anything to worry about. I have hired people before to do jobs for me. I have hired them, and I always hire the one who makes me think that they will be able to do the job and I won't have to worry about it anymore. How is this supposed to be an important idea at all? Headland went on, and it justifies some crazy behavior. It justifies, like, I remember somebody telling me something about a male showrunner/creator type person and their behavior. And listen, I'm not perfect by any means, but I think if you set yourself up that way, male or female, you are setting yourself up for failure. You are setting yourself up to fail because there is no way to do something like Russian Doll by yourself. There's no way to do something like any of the films that I mentioned in the Hollywood Reporter article. She then shifted the conversation to Star Wars. One of the things that I just did recently is I bought all of the concept art for Star Wars, for the original Star Wars, by that great guy, I've forgotten his name. I just bought that 2-volume book about him, and Ralph McQuarrie, that's his name. Now, get your best cringe face ready, me hearties, because this next part is atrocious. She says, so, I've just recently got his 2-volume set of Star Wars concept art from Ralph McQuarrie, and I'm like, this is insane, she remarked. This guy created Star Wars. Like really. Like you see the evolution of the idea from what George is trying to express to him, to what he puts down on the piece of paper, to what it eventually becomes, to why he makes particular decisions, like why he decides to take things in one direction and not the other.
You idiot!
Alright now, far be it from me to take anything away from an artist. This has been a topic of conversation in comic books for decades. Who is more important, the artist or the writer? In fact, Image Comics, that was created back in the 90s, was created with this premise. Guys like Todd McFarlane wanted to get some credit as the creator of characters like Venom. He wanted to get some sort of credit as the creator of that character, and when Marvel wouldn't give it to them, a bunch of these artists created Image Comics and proved that they had just as much creative relevancy as the writers who were writing the comic books that they drew. So once again, I'm not trying to take anything away from artists, but in this instance, George Lucas created an entire damned galaxy. Once more, for the people in the back, not trying to take anything away from Ralph McQuarrie, but he was hired by George, which was another of George's great choices, in order to bring his creations to life. This is in no way controversial, but Leslye wasn't finished yet. She says, this is like what we understand to be Star Wars. The idea that that only came from George Lucas. That only George Lucas holds the key for what we understand to be Star Wars is just untrue. And I think the prequels are an excellent example of that. You know what this sounds like to me? This sounds like a weaselly way to justify her own position in Star Wars. It sounds like a way to clear a path to try to gain as much credit as a Star Wars creator as she can possibly get. It sounds to me like she's trying to get that street cred with these Star Wars geeks. It sounds to me like she'll use any angle she can possibly find in order to paint herself as some sort of brilliant creative in order to usurp the great things that others before her have accomplished. She continued, but you look at McQuarrie's work and you realize what an indelible mark this man has made on culture via this one role he played on this film. And the idea that, like, when you are hiring a director, that everyone is sitting in there waiting for George Lucas and not for the person who is going to know to hire Ralph McQuarrie, that's the problem. That's the misogyny and the problem with the auteur myth as it stands today. Hey, stupid ass. George Lucas was the one who hired Ralph McQuarrie back before the movie was even being made. He hired McQuarrie to do concept art in order to sell the idea of making the movie to Fox. Turns out George Lucas had a brilliant idea for a movie. He wrote Star Wars, and he wanted Fox to essentially produce the film. He wanted them to give the green light. He wanted their resources so that he could actually make the movie. This isn't like a traditional Hollywood production where someone from a studio hires a director for a movie that they were already planning to make. This was George Lucas selling his idea to Fox. I mean, George wasn't hired by Fox and then just given total leeway by the studio to direct other people on how to make A New Hope. He frickin' created the whole thing out of thin air, hired a talented artist to put his ideas into a series of images, and then sold his genius idea to Fox. That's why he owned the entire franchise, including merchandise rights, up until he sold to Disney. For more information on the history of how the idea of a Star Wars movie was sold to Fox by George Lucas, I suggest reading the rest of this article. It's rather long, so I can't read it all here. I've got a link in the description. But this clod, Leslye Headland, is so historically illiterate, and she thinks everyone else is too, so she believes she can twist things around so that she looks like a victim. Now, have some directors used the auteur label as a means of mistreating people? Yeah, I'm sure of it. Harvey Weinstein did it as a producer, but Leslye would know all about that. Truth is, bad bosses exist. Some people are just assholes. It's just a fact of life. But this ain't it, Leslye, and if you're trying to drum up sympathy in order to get us to watch your shitty Star Wars fan fiction, well, you're barking up the wrong tree, lady. George Lucas is a fairly untouchable figure within the Star Wars mythology. People will always revere him. Even when a bunch of us weren't particularly happy with the prequels, we at least respected him as the creator of Star Wars. Now, chameleon social climbers like Leslye Headland may work in places like Hollywood, where fads and appearance are everything. But here in real life, we aren't impressed by your constant wokery. Now, what do you guys think? Is her whining going to convince you to go and watch The Acolyte when it comes out? My guess is a big ol' hell no. Thanks for watching, me hearties. If you haven't already, your captain is inviting you to subscribe to the channel and become a part of the crew. Life as a space pirate may not be glamorous, but there's always plenty of booty.